this is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Do you think we need one more?
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Do you think we need one more?
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
All right, we'll get one more.
Spec, a comic book podcast with Jake and Jesus.
What's going on, spectators, and welcome to episode 96 of everybody's favorite comic book podcast, Spec Tales. My name is Jake, and in high school, I was voted most likely to be the glasses half of a glasses and beard dynamic comic podcast hosting duo. I guess they were right. The man to my digital left, on the other hand, was shockingly voted least likely to be bearded. But look at him now, folks. A beard literally heard round the world. He is the amazing Jesus. What's going on, Jesus?
Wow. First of all, that was not true. That was actually an alter ego of mine that was voted that. But me, fun fact, I had to shave every day in the nurse's office in high school, man. Literally, like I'm one of those guys that if I shave in the morning, I got a 5 o'clock shadow at noon. So every morning I was getting sent down. People knew the beard was coming, man. The beard was coming. They knew. It was just a matter of time.
You had a beard in kindergarten? Is that what you're saying?
No, man. Before that. You're waiting too long, man. It was before. I was in diapers with the beard, man. But we also have another awesome beard today, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, please don't get ahead of me. I have a whole thing I have to read before you're allowed to say anything about that.
I understand. That's why I did it.
If this is your first time joining us for Spec Tales, thank you for giving us a listen. Spec Tales is a comic book podcast that asks collectors and creators, what is your grail tale? Each week, we explore news stories about the comic book grails we love, the epic journeys behind how they were obtained, and how they inspired new creativity.
We also dive into some comic book speculation and how, as collectors, we can help the hobby pay for itself.
Now, this week, Jesus, we need to be on the top of our game. There is absolutely no room for spine ticks, creases, or dog ear corners. And that is because of the beard that you were referring to earlier. This week, we are lucky enough to be joined by one of the most respected comic book pressers in the industry. He's an authorized CGC dealer and signature facilitator. He has a beard that really challenges the best beard I know, and that would be Jesus the beard. But his is pretty close. His Instagram handle is The Comic Book Presser. He's Chris Myers. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
What's up, guys? Great to be here. Thanks a lot for having me on.
Thank you for joining us, number one. Number two, man, from a marketing standpoint, The Comic Book Presser. How did you get that, man? You search it, you're coming up.
I have a fine art background. I have a bachelor's degree in communication design and a master of fine arts in animation. So when I started to spin into this, I was trying to think of what's that name where people won't forget it. And when I did this, there weren't so many other names that sound like mine. It was like, who's that guy? The Comic Book Presser. And now it's like, oh my God, there's so many that sound almost just like it. I don't know if it was a great idea or not, but there's no turning back now.
You can't miss it. You are it's like the Ohio State University. They're always like oh yeah, look at that. He even has an Ohio State hat.
Yeah, I'm from Ohio. I love the Bucks, but I didn't do it just because it is the Ohio State University.
Oh my God.
I am the Comic Book Presser.
Does Ryan know this? Oh man, if he doesn't. Ryan's from Michigan, right?
Oh, that son of a bitch. I have no idea. Have I been pumping money to Michigan?
Yeah. He's one of their biggest donors.
They just beat us last weekend. They're not on my favorite list at all.
Well, he does not live in Michigan. He is from Michigan, I believe. We're bringing up Ryan at Automatic Comics, of course, because Ryan is how we were initially introduced to you and your work. Ryan constantly will talk about you as his presser on his channel, and he regularly will recommend when Jesus and I have talked to him about who to go to for pressing. He's like, well, I use Chris, the comic book presser. Now, I don't actually know if if Ryan knows that he's supporting a Buckeye on the other hand. And let me tell you, he is a big Wolverines fan. So this is hilarious.
This is awesome.
I'm enjoying this so much more now. I didn't even notice your hat.
Yes,
and now it's
that's awesome.
The big game was just last weekend, and I'm still salty as hell, man. Michigan won for 30 in a row. They cheat, Ryan. You stole the signs. Cheers. We'll see what happens next year. But can I say this, though, not to go into football too much? I respect the rivalry, and I do typically wish for Michigan to win when they're playing anyone outside the Big Ten, take down the other conferences. But when it comes to Ohio State, I want to kick their tail every time.
I don't know if Ryan would give you the same gesture. I think he, from what in my conversations. So, Chris, for the record, I am from Nebraska. So I am
a Big Ten guy.
Yeah, Big Ten guy, not a big winner ever. but someday we'll be great again. And we, for some reason, especially lately, maybe it's just because it's been kind of hitting the zeitgeist lately. We've been talking a lot of football on the show. Especially football and sports in general. So if you're one of those people who was clicking forward 30 seconds until we got done talking about sports, you can stop clicking forward right now as we are going to officially get into comic books. I mean, as funny as it was with Ryan and the Michigan thing, honestly, Ryan does say all the nicest things about you and the work that you do. So let's talk real briefly about that, because we have some firsthand experience in this room right now, in this space. One of us has sent books to you, and it is not currently me. So that can only be one other person.
Yeah, that's me. I've sent books to Chris on a couple occasions. I sent some, and we were talking about it a little bit beforehand. In 2020, I sent him some books, and I was just thanking Chris of how kind of like what's the word that I'm looking for? Receptive he was to helping me out, trying to buy an AF-15 at the time in 2020, which you don't get that a lot, I guess, from like, I guess, certain presses or things like that. It's just, send in the books and then they press them, and then, but there was more of a relationship there. And I really enjoyed that, and I wanted to thank you for that. But yeah, so I've sent some books to him in 2020, and then now in 2023, I have sent him some more books in my quest to dominate in the golden age of comics era. I'm just joking, guys. I'm just starting out, and I know Ryan uses Chris for the golden age books, and what better way to learn more about golden age books than sending somebody like Chris, who knows a ton about the paper and the paper quality of the golden age books.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man. We definitely appreciate you. And it was awesome that just talking to you guys, I was like, oh yeah, that's your Spider-Man, because it's hard to keep track sometimes between tags on Instagram and getting back to people. I typically do on there, but it's hard to keep track of everything. So it was awesome when I was like, wait a minute, I can see that book from where I'm sitting right now, man. And it's all finished. And I like it so much, I'm going to do a post about it really, really soon. Hopefully even this week, but next week at the latest.
Awesome. And Chris is talking about my ASM1 guys that I've talked about previously on, I don't remember what episode it was, but I also talked about it on our floppies for Patreon. I bought it in May from it was such a sketchy way of buying it. Remember we talked about it was from Craigslist.
Totally. The Craigslist, and the guy was in a different state, and I had absolute zero idea what you were trying to accomplish with it. But I mean,
he flew in. He flew in from Denver into Dallas, and I met him up in Dallas, and we met and we talked comic books. And like I mentioned, that guy's owned it. He owned that book since 1988. He did a trade for it, which was a really good trade on his part. And it's had those defects since then. He had it in a top loader. He's not a big ASM fan or Amazing Spider-Man fan. That's why he was getting rid of it. He just had a baby, and he wanted it to go to a collector. And as you guys know, I'm a big ASM. My grail is AF-15. ASM1 is the closest thing I can get to right now. I'm not saying I will sell it. I might sell it, but if I do, it would be to get an AF-15, and that's my continuing journey for my grail tale that I will tell one day. But yeah, that ASM1 has a lot of history behind it, and I'm glad it's in Chris's hands, and he was able to work his magic on it. Which by the way, I definitely have a lot of questions for you about pressing. and it's paper, right? Like it's paper, and paper reacts differently. I guess what would be, because again, I sent you some Golden Age books. I think I sent you one like cover detached, right? Like it's just they're falling apart. What are some of the main differences that you have to do between, I guess, like a Golden Age book and like a Bronze Age book that's a lot newer, right? Like what are some of those things, if you could tell us some of the nuances in it?
Right. Well, one of the biggest things is just with those Golden Age books, you have to just see how supple the paper is, how much it's going to be able to handle, basically. And sometimes you can tell from a picture, but sometimes you just need to have the book in hand, and it's like, oh my God, I'm scared to practically take this out of the bag, let alone start to humidify it. But it's always about knowing how far to push it, basically from a safe distance, and when it's time to stop. So sometimes I don't send out an email, but sometimes I'll say, we have to send an email to this person because they're going to complain because there's a dent still. But I want them to understand we've worked on it maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times, all different types of techniques. And at this point, I'm worried something would get damaged, if we kept pushing it. And it's also not just about flattening the comic book. You've probably heard them called pancake one, Sometimes I think people can just put a book in the press and just slam it down super tight and come back days later. And I think that's when you end up with a spine that looks like a sword. Like the tip of a sword, rather, it's all pointed. That should not be that way. Your spine should still be fluffy and around after. But anyway, so the biggest thing between like Golden Age and Bronze Age is just what you have to do to compensate for that old school paper. And also the Golden Age typically has that thicker cover, so it's already putting up a little bit more of a fight.
So I did have a question on that too, and so 2 questions on that. One, like I'm assuming it was trial and error, right? Like you just kept messing with stuff until you figured it out, right? Like, and I'm sure there was some bumps and bruises along the way. But then the second, I guess, question or comment I have is, and I don't know, I'm assuming, right? Because paper is some of it is elastic, right? Like it bounces back, right? So, and I guess this goes into the other part that we want to talk about. Whenever you press something, a book, and you send it to a grading company, you're trying to get it there in a certain amount of time, right? Because if it doesn't get there, there's a possibility, or if they take a long time like they did during the boom in 2021, that paper could possibly, not all the way, right? Like not rebound all the way to how it was prior, but some of the defects might come back out of the book if it's just waiting to get graded. Am I correct in assuming that?
Well, I guess you're correct. Yes and no. Because to me, while I would never claim I'm perfect, my books should not be reverting, so people should be able to pull out a book that they had me or my company pressed 4 years ago, and it should still look really nice. And we humidify every book, and that takes a lot of extra time and effort, and that helps reset the paper because, they use water to make the paper, and that's kind of like resetting it. So that's a big difference. If anyone isn't even doing humidification, then I think it's kind of like, just don't, that's really rough. That's really just learning the ropes, I guess, which is fine. You got to start somewhere. But if you're sending them off to pay, I would definitely make sure someone's humidifying them. And so really, like I said, I'm not going to pretend I'm absolutely perfect, but we're not a company that the books revert. So it should be you look at the book and enjoy it for years to come, and it's the same. And I'm not going to say that no one's ever pulled a book out. I fortunately haven't had lots of emails or anything about it, but it's a journey, right? So, but yeah, they should not be reverting.
Nice. Hey, Zeus, you mind if I jump in with a question here?
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
So, Chris, something that I have been wanting to ask with you specifically. So my LCS, which I've talked about a lot on the show, and I'm a big fan of my LCS, the owner, super good to me. He's a really great guy. And every time I go in there, we could sit and talk for an hour, just BSing about comics and writers he likes or artists or whatever. And him and I agree on a lot of things. He grew up reading like Creepy and Eerie magazine, Creepy being one of my favorite series of all time, Jesus as well. But one of the things that one of the very stark differences between my opinion and the owner of my LCS's opinion is specifically on pressing and cleaning a book. And while he's not a rude individual, he's not sitting there saying like it's the worst thing in the world. However, he is a traditionalist in a sense where he believes that is an alteration, that it's no longer the original book. And I'm curious, as a presser, I don't know if you go to cons or things like that, but do you find yourself in conversations, healthy conversations, but about what you're doing? Is it an alteration to the book originally, or is it just is it restoration? Do you feel like it is?
Right. Typically, restoration is when it's more of adding on. Often they'll say adding or subtracting. So when you're marrying something, you're filling in a cover, So in my humble opinion, this is actually making it, you used a couple terms in there I was going to hit on, but it's basically setting it back to its original form. It's not taking away, it's not adding to it. And we only dry clean here also. So we aren't putting any types of chemicals on. We do humidify, but that's just, the humidity doing its thing here, the steam. So I had one person leave a nasty comment on, I'm not plugging my YouTube channel, man. There's like 4 videos there, but I have it for when I need it, right? But they left a comment on a video just trashing about how it was like destroying the book. And I went to his page and he had like the Three Stooges and all this old school stuff. So I was like, okay, guys in his late 70s, he's totally against it. And I wanted to be like, okay, well, guess what? When you leave your books to someone, because they'll last longer than you, they're going to be pressed in, pal. So, but I didn't want to say anything. I just deleted the comment and moved on, trying to keep it professional. To build on that, though, it's interesting because I do not use peroxide. And, that's the whole big thing. People are using peroxide and blue lights to bleach the covers. And it's interesting because you don't want to be the graphic designer when computers came out that didn't jump on the computer and then they lost their job. You got to keep up with the times, but you have to take it slow. You don't want to just grab money. And true paper conservationists do use heat and pressure and do humidify, but they would not spray 3% peroxide on a book and put it under the lights because they would say that's damaging in the long term. Is that controversial right now? Yeah, it is. But guess what? I kind of feel like I'm going to be fixing people's books in 10 years, but I want to keep up with the times. So I do. And there are other ways that people are continuing to dilute more and more and more to get it to a safe zone. But I think some people are jumping on trying to just make a quick buck, and we'll see where that all goes.
So that is a technique that you are dipping your toe in, I guess?
Absolutely not. I learned how to do it,
okay,
and I made a judgment call not to.
Okay.
Also, as a CGC dealer and signature facilitator, every time you send a book in that you have used peroxide on, you're basically bleaching the comic, trying not to get caught. And when they do catch it, they ding it. They give it a purple label, or if you're lucky, it's conserved label. Now that's cool because some people do fantastic work and they go for the conserved label. That's when you're just cleaning them, not necessarily just like the peroxide. So I'm not, and part of me wonders, like if CGC is trying to catch this and flag it, and you're building a company that's trying to sneak it by every single time, there's a little bit of a gray area there that I'm not necessarily taking part of.
No, I totally understand. I wasn't even aware that was a thing going on within the pressing and cleaning industries. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of like enemies. Gray area is a good, I guess, way of saying is kind of bending the rules and trying to like sneak it in, like you mentioned. The other thing about these older, guys, older collectors, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past, is before there were grading companies, right? Before there were great, and even I guess before there was a lot of collectors wanting, higher grades, restoration or color touch was normal. Like it was something that was done that wasn't, I guess, as frowned upon or looked down upon as it is now. And they didn't consider it, adding or subtracting from. I mean, they did consider it to an extent, but it wasn't what it is now. So it's just interesting that those same guys that were okay with the color touch, like now they don't want pressing, or now they don't want dry cleaning and stuff like that, when the color touch to me is a lot heavier type of restoration or changing of the actual book. But to them, it's trying to put it back to what the cover was whenever it came out or what have you. I don't know. But it's just interesting. And I think that's going to continue to happen for a while. There's a lot of older collectors like that. And that's okay, right? Like everybody collects how they collect. And like you mentioned, eventually, when those books get, unless they burn them, when those books get in other people's hands, they'll get pressed and clean and probably graded.
And really, though, I respect everyone's decisions, and that's their business, right? And that's their books. It was just, this guy was like coming at me.
Yeah.
Like,
well, he's coming out and attacking you.
In your lane, and I'll stay in mine, bro. But I'm with you. And actually, I would guess that the most people that are against pressing are also firmly against color touch. Like, I have, man, I can remember being 12 and putting a little black marker on a couple of mine, but I was so young. I don't even think I was trying to like be vicious, and I kept them, so I wasn't trying to be like some jerk, but fortunately I remembered which ones they were. So at one point I went through and put a little CT sticker on them all, like 12-year-old Chris thought this was cute. Not so much.
Now, Jesus, have I told you my comic book conspiracy theory on how Apple impacted the bias of labels within CGC?
Apple?
Apple computers. This is it's all subconscious now, but this is the conspiracy theory. So what are the color of the CGC labels that everybody wants?
Blue.
Well, let's stick with blue. I mean, I understand the gold, but
blue and gold.
But blue. And what color is the label that everybody likes the least?
Purple.
Green.
Oh, green. I'm sorry. Qualified. Yeah. Or purple. Purple label of death too.
Yeah, purple label of death. Okay. But when it comes to text messages, you got that friend, right? You're using your iPhone, you're texting your buddy, and you text somebody and they get green text messages. Oh, that's gross, isn't it? And then you slowly but surely don't text that person anymore, and you exclude them from group text because they don't have blue.
And it's all subconscious. You don't do it on purpose. It's just they got green text messages. What are you supposed to do with that?
Well, and there's exactly. And so here's the theory, of course, is that CGC and Apple have been in cahoots, just slowly but surely. Just trying to push everybody into the blue territory. Blue means good, green means bad. And
I mean, that's about right. When did those labels come into effect? In 07 or 06, right? When the iPhone came out. I know they're from
right around the time.
Right. I mean, it's a shady time frame. I don't quite remember. I know CGC started in 2000, but those labels have gone through some changes. I think you're right. I think you're onto something, Jake.
Purple label of death is definitely the one that people hate the most, though, and isn't it interesting, though, that in so many other fields, like restored cars, that they're valuable. Like so many other things, it's
restored is good, yes.
But just with comics, that it's worth basically half.
So
if it's a $3,000 6.0, and then if it's a blue 6.0 and it's worth $3,000, you can just bet that it's worth $1,500 as the purple.
Guys, and I know that we're going to continue to talk a little bit more on pressing and things like that, Chris, but I'd really like to jump into our first segment here.
Recent pickups.
All right, that's right. The recent pickup segment where we're going to talk about a book or comic or something collectible related that we've recently picked up. Hey, Zeus, this is traditionally where you go first, so have at it.
All right, man, I have two things that I want to talk about, and it's pretty cool because one of them's as a reader, and then the other one is as a collector. So first, I want to talk about this. I talked a little bit about it on our Patreon, and this is a really cool variant cover. But it's something that I started reading. I thought was really cool, really interesting, and then I just forgot about it. And I know it happens sometimes. I don't put all the books that I'm reading on my pull list. One, it's a subconscious thing. Like I don't want to have like 25 books on my pull list, and it just messes with me. But inevitably, stuff like this happens where I forget about books that I'm reading. This is the Cull number 2.
Yeah,
I forgot about it. We've talked about it on here.
We did talk about the Cull number 1, I believe.
The number 1, yeah. So this is number 2 that I was finally able to find out in the wild. It's not only, but it's a variant cover. That's the only one I was able to find because I don't know exactly when it came out. It's very interesting. It continues to be interesting. I remember why I enjoyed the first one and why I wanted to read it more. It's interesting, but then there's also a lot that it's asking the reader to do as far as belief in the book and the characters. It stretches a lot, right? To me. But I'm willing to give it that benefit of the doubt just because of the writer. I think it's Kelly Thompson.
Okay.
And she's had a bunch of hits in the past. And I'm still interested in it because it's building to something, and I'm interested to see what that something is. So this is the Cull number 2. This is the first thing on my recent pickups. I'm going to continue to look for. I don't know when number 3 comes out. I don't know if it's already out or not, but I'm going to continue to read this. And it was just one of those things where it's just interesting that I forget to read some books that I'm interested in, and I finally remember, and I start reading them again. I'm like, oh, I remember why I like them. So that's number 1 on my recent pickup. And then number 2, I haven't talked to you about this, but again, going into my golden age. I'm in my golden age era, as they will.
Jesus' golden era.
Yeah. So we're coming off Black Friday, right? A lot of LCSs do a lot of deals. My LCS, one of the LCSs that I go to had a big deal. This book was underpriced already to begin with, slightly, and then plus the Black Friday sale, I had to get it. It's not a book that I collect or that I'm wanting to collect. I'm really looking at this book as a means to, help me in my collecting going forward, and that means selling it at a discount to somebody, but still making money on it, so that I can purchase more Golden Age stuff that I'm interested in. And I didn't know what it was. I looked at. I had. Let me rephrase that. I knew what it was because I always see it on the back wall. Nobody's buying it. Like, what is that book? It's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. I'm talking about none other than 4-color number 386 from what is it? March of 1952. A Carl Banks story, cover and art. It is Uncle Scrooge number 1, Only a Poor Old Man. This is the first Uncle Scrooge in the title in a 6.0.
Oh, nice. I have seen that cover too. That's a great cover.
Yeah.
With the rowboat.
The Scrooge
yeah.
Yeah, and the rowboat's called Pennywise.
Which is awesome.
So Uncle Scrooge on the back.
That's it. Now, I have to ask though, that Pennywise, what year was that book? 52?
1952.
Yeah, so that definitely predates it by a long
Yeah,
shot,
no, yeah, but could it have influenced?
I mean, maybe. I mean, to me, I don't know how old Stephen King is, but was he?
He's 80 something, I think.
Yeah, was he an Uncle Scrooge reader? Was this? Now we've got another comic book conspiracy theory coming out.
There you go.
Jesus is suggesting that the name Pennywise originally came from a Walt Disney Uncle Scrooge book. This is big stuff. Nice.
Breaking news, guys.
All right. Well, nice pickup. You really are getting into this Golden Age stuff, so that's cool, man.
Try letting you know, man. I gave everybody fair warning. Please don't tell. I gave everybody fair warning. I told them what I was doing. I'm not gonna go exclusive, but it is gonna be a big part going forward. Uncle Scrooge. I mean, I'm doing it all. Like I sent Chris pre-code horror, and then also personally, I'm looking into the Batman stuff, the early Batman stuff. I'm really excited about Detective Comics and Batman.
Hey,
and I got something coming too that I haven't told you about, Jake. But
really?
You know.
Well, if you want a little Golden Age Batman advice as far as like what to collect, I hear that Batman number 1 is a very good pickup if you can find that one out there.
You know what? That's actually great advice. I'm gonna keep my eyes peeled for a good deal on that, Jake.
Good job. Good job. All right. Well, Chris, I'm going to pass the mic over to you. Do you have something for recent pickups today?
Yeah, I sure do. I guess, as you guys were mentioning, I've been promoting. I finished my ASM and X-Men run just before COVID, and we can talk about that later if you want. But so I kind of laid off superheroes a little bit, and I have never stopped collecting since I was about 12 or so. So maybe even, I guess since third grade, really, that was just coming off the newsstand, though, back in the real day. But anyway, I always have had a huge love for indie books also. Turtles is what brought me into a comic shop.
Oh,
the
nice.
First time. It actually was just before the cartoon came out, like in 1988. And so I was like, whoa, now there's a cartoon. I've been collecting this for like 4 months. So anyway, awesome. And then in college, I still went to the comic stores. I just was only collecting maybe 6 titles for a couple of years, but I kept going. So I was really reading a lot of indies. So I actually just recently picked up Strangers in Paradise #1, the very, very first issue. That was the first appearance.
Cool.
I love Strangers in Paradise. I've bought everything Terry Moore has done since the Strangers in Paradise one that came out just after those first 3. So I've read everything he's pretty much written and drawn for 30 years or so. Wow. And then I also bought, I'm really stoked about this one, Cerebus. It's number 15.
Nice.
I thought this one is cool because it's a Dave Sim file copy, and it's signed by him.
Wow.
And actually it says Dave Sim file copy. So that was pretty cool to get one that came right out of his collection. And it's a 9.6 from 1980 and was not that expensive, actually. And then I also got Cerebus 2 because I just got on this kick. It was by the same seller. And I was like, oh, man, now, sure, I don't have a 1, and I'd like a 1 someday, but these were just fun purchases.
Yeah.
And the Cerebus was kind of on a whim. The Strangers in Paradise was one I've been wanting for long time. I just was not turning my head from Marvel, Spider-Man and X-Men runs. And Terry Moore had this sale he was promoting on Instagram like 2 months ago or so, and he was selling some artwork, and I snagged a couple sketches, and then I was like, I'm buying that. I'm just going to buy that #1. No, I'm doing it all at once. So, and then I'll say one other thing, since you mentioned a modern one too there, Jesus. I haven't read it yet, but the book I'm the most pumped about is the Superior Spider-Man #1 that just came out. Again, I loved that, man. I can so clearly remember reading when 700 came out. And just that whole story was so awesome. So I do think I'm going to love that.
So, man, that's interesting you said, because that was a controversial, like, I was reading it, and when I read it, I really enjoyed it. And to me, it's what comic books are about. Like, that's some crazy out of left field stuff, but it's also kind of makes sense, and it kind of like helps you understand like the character more and how powerful even, Peter Parker is just as a person, right? As a being, that he's able to change Otto Octavius's mind of how genuine he is as a human being, right? And so I really enjoyed it. And I know a lot of people, I mean, not a lot of people, but you get your people that don't like it and say that it was dumb. How can you kill Peter Parker and yada yada and whatever. But Jake, you know what we're talking about?
I do. I was collecting at the time when 700 came out. Funny enough, I was actually collecting and reading mostly just Batman and DC at the time. And the gentleman who was my LCS, he didn't own it, but he was the guy who was always working when I walked in there. And I remember going and picking up my pull list, and he had included in my pull list, multiple copies of ASM 700. And it was like, he had one of the originals, and then the other one that I got is it's got like the snow on the cover. It's like the more, I think, Christmassy or something like that cover. Anyway, he put them in there, and he was like, those are gifts. I was like, what? And he was just like, you can just have those. He's like, we're selling them like crazy. And I know that you're reading a lot of Batman, but you really should be reading this Spider-Man. And then it's like, he did it to get me into Spider-Man, but he gave me 2 covers knowing that I was collecting. It was a really cool story. I've never told it on the show before, but yes, I very much know about that. And it was weird because it was such a big event for such a major Marvel character that even me, who had nothing to do with Marvel at that time, even I read it, which is, I think it's nuts. I think that just shows how big the event really was. And I agree with you. It was such a left field twist where I was like, I'm sorry, what? So I even bought back. I bought back issues so that I could catch up to the story, and then I bought new issues, and yeah, it was weird.
So that kind of leads me to, you know, a little bit, it's not out of order because it's not going to be a Spec thing, but I mean, honestly, you have right before that was the Grim Hunt, right? Which is like, I think 637 through I think 640 something. And then you had Shed, which was the Killer Croc storyline. But the Grim Hunt includes the new Madam Web. And so, and that Madam Web, the trailer it just dropped.
Yeah.
So conspiracy, maybe they're going to make a Superior Spider-Man come out of left field. I don't know. Just throwing it out there, Jake. I'm putting 2 and 2 together, and it's making 8 right now. So.
Crazier things have happened, and from what I can tell, Sony is willing to do whatever it takes to try to sell movies. So I think that was a fun recent pickup, Chris, because it took us down a nice little fun wormhole for storylines and things like that, and I got to tell the recent pickup story about getting the ASM 700, which I've never told. So look at that.
Pretty cool.
All right. And I'm going to go ahead, and my recent pickup this week is actually a trade that I'm making. And the funny part is Jesus, it's nothing. It's a trade of trades, I guess. Trade of trade paperbacks. And the best part is I got to pick my side of the trade. Like, so our friend Lance from Comic Book Keepers, he's doing some sort of like trading his books for books he doesn't have. And he sent me a photo of all the books that he was willing to trade. And I got to pick, but he told me I can just send him basically anything. As far as I know, it's anything. Lance, if you're listening and that was not the original deal, maybe you should reach out, because otherwise you're going to get some random stuff. No, I haven't selected what I'm actually going to trade him, but he sent me, this is the first trade paperback of Radiant Black, which I have not read, but written by Kyle Higgins, and art is Marcelo Costa. Which I'm not familiar with Marcelo Costa. I know Kyle Higgins, and I know why Lance likes it, because I know Kyle Higgins does a lot of Power Rangers stuff, correct? Mm-hmm. And Lance is a huge Power Rangers fan, and which, again, it is another thing he's recommended I read, and I haven't read yet. But the funny thing was, I've been hearing from lots of people to pick up Radiant Black and to read the Radiant Universe, and so when I saw this book in the stack of books he was willing to trade, I was like, listen, I have not read any of the Radiant books, nothing in that universe. Is Radiant Black an okay place to start? And he said, it is absolutely the place to start. This is the first one. This is the first. Radiant Black was the first book. So I'm looking forward to it. The only thing I will say that I take a little umbrage with on the back side of this book, is a quote, and I'm going to hold it up for you guys to see. You can see that there is a quote from Scott Snyder, and there's nothing wrong with the quote. Radiant Black is too much fun, classic superhero greatness remade brightly and brilliantly for a new generation. Good quote. However, Scott Snyder, and then these are the books they say he wrote: Undiscovered Country, Witches, and Justice League. Now, Witches is good. His Justice League and Undiscovered Country I have not read. But you're telling me that you have the guy who wrote Batman New 52, who invented the Court of Owls, the guy who did American Vampire, the guy who did, actually his Swamp Thing was legit while he was writing it. So he did all this stuff. Witches is the only one on here where I'm like, that one belongs. but they put like all of that stuff he wrote, and they decide to put Undiscovered Country and Justice League on here. Get out of here with that.
I take umbrage to your umbrage.
Well, no, you've already had your recent pickups. My umbrage stands.
You can't double umbrage and umbrage.
Exactly. But I am very grateful to Lance for proposing the trade and letting me do this. I've not read it yet. I'm going to crack into that here very soon. I had a couple of other things on my list I needed to finish up reading before I could dive into Radiant Black. I will be doing that shortly. But Lance, thank you very much. And you were going to be getting a box of random. I'll pick out some good stuff and send it your way. So that is my recent pickup. Wow, I mean, trading with a previous guest of the show, friend of the show, really expanding my horizons. And also, we never say a whole lot of negative stuff. I even had negative things to say about something comic related. So I'm going to give myself 4 tater tots for the my recent pickup. And I'm going to automatically award myself the victory for the day. So thank you very much for you guys participating. 4 tater tots for me. I'm sure all of the listeners out there will completely agree with the number of tots that I've awarded myself. Chris, you have absolutely no idea what that last part meant, but just know that you did a really good job, and tater tots mean good things, and you definitely beat Jesus.
And I'm guessing that's out of 10.
It's out of 5.
Oh, some shade at you, see?
I'm glad. So look, all I'm saying is I got Scrooged. All I'm saying.
Well, you're the one who brought the book. But that immediately takes us, guys, right into our next segment.
Grail Tale.
Grail Tale.
Grail Tale. Grail Tale. Grail Tale.
That's right, the Grail Tale segment. This is a segment where we're going to hand the mic over to Chris. We're going to ask him to entertain us with a witty and awesome Grail Tale, and we're just going to kick our feet up. I'm actually drinking a Sprite tonight. I don't know what Jesus is drinking, but Chris, the mic's all yours.
All right, thanks. Yeah, my Grail Tale echoes Jesus. It's my Amazing Spider-Man #1. It's a 5.0 CGC Blue label. Let's see. I bought this when I lived in Los Angeles, and it's one of those classic cases where I just started to sell a lot of comic books I didn't care about anymore, and it took a long time. I didn't sell too many that I regret. Nothing I really care about. There was just a time when I was like, damn, I sold a Marvel team-up run that has Invincible and Spider-Man. You know, like, a big deal. It's a $40 book or something, but a couple snuck by me. But it was all about getting to the goal there. And the kind of interesting thing about that, too, is my grandfather drove trains, and he ended up being pretty big, high up in the Cincinnati. He was the superintendent. He was really high up running a lot of the tracks, supervising from St. Louis to Chicago at one point, even for B&O Railroad. So I actually inherited his railroad antiques. And it was interesting because it's stuff I'd seen, and it was my grandpa's, and he was proud of his collection, but it didn't really make me feel bad when I felt like I was selling it to turn it into my collection. So I think if I was just selling it for something else, like it, not that it probably should have mattered, but if I was just buying it to get a car or a new TV or something, I think I would have felt a little bad, but I felt like I'm selling his collection to invest in my collection. So that was kind of interesting. I was selling like old railroad lanterns and maps of the track and all kinds of stuff on eBay like crazy for like a year and a half or so. I was selling a lot. Sometimes I was even selling stuff that was like $3. I was like, it adds up. I wouldn't do that now, but you have your times when you're just like, I'm unloading stuff.
Yeah,
I wouldn't pack something like that now. But yeah, my Grail is the ASM1, and then real quick, my second Grail is the X-Men #1. That's a 4.0.
Oh, that's awesome.
And if you could go into it, because you posted, and this. I mean, we've I've been following you for a while. Like I mentioned, I sent you some books back in 2020, so I've been following you for a while. But I didn't know, that you were an avid and active collector. And so you apparently finished those runs of ASM, right? And also X-Men. So what did that entail? How long have you been collecting them? And what were, I guess, some of the more difficult ones to, besides ASM 1 and X-Men, right? Which were some of the most?
Okay, so in some ways I could say that I started collecting this run in 88, because that's when I started going to the shops, and Amazing Spider-Man 300 was out right about that time. And I bought that because Todd McFarlane's awesome, but I was like, whoa, this is, of course I knew Spider-Man, but Todd McFarlane just really captured my eye. And then I haven't missed an issue since. So I was like, I have 700 issues I just bought off the shelf.
Damn.
So at least I only had to go back 299. But that still took me 33 years, I think. And it was really that case of every Christmas, of my adult life. So often I'm like, I just want a comic book. My wife would be so bored, I'm like, I want to buy something and you can just help me pay for it. I'm talking like through high school and college and everything. So, actually, a real quick side story. I always joke that I didn't buy lunch from like 6th grade to senior year because I would save $2 a day and have $10 at the end of the week to go to the comic store with, man. So I'd always be sitting like a bag of chips, but $10 was a lot back when they were $1.25, right?
Yeah, that's a few comics.
For sure.
Yeah, so I actually finished off both the runs. I kind of would bounce around between them. I finished off both the runs just before COVID. So it was really nice that when all the stuff was going through the roof, I was like, thank goodness, man. I got some for like $650 that, and of course now they're maybe worth, if I paid $650 then, it probably went up to $1,800 and now they're at $800, but it's the journey, right? But yeah. Some of the other hard ones, let's see. I'll be posting this one soon when I'm going to share that collector first, those posts, but my ASM number 2 is a 6.0 signed by Stan Lee with the gold yellow label. That was one of the pricier ones, but again, I bought it back before it was, it was in the thousands though when I bought it. X-Men 94 was a big one because, through this journey of 33 years, I think I added it up the other day. Sometimes sometimes a $30 book's a big deal, right? Because I've been doing this through my whole entire life, through college and through grad school and through the beginning of my games career, and then doing it for a decade and, being able to have a little bit extra money on things. So I remember when I lived in LA, buying X-Men 94 for $300 was a damn big deal, So that was kind of an exciting one for me.
That's cool.
And well, go ahead, Jake.
Well, I was just going to comment on how collecting a run specifically is the grail, is the journey of its own, and how each individual book kind of has its own story attached to it. And we haven't done a lot of run collecting on the show specifically. I mean, we generally do. We've talked about runs, but in some cases, it's never been the journey is never, it doesn't feel like it's ever elapsed this much time either. Although I think Jason Ayers had a pretty sizable run as well, or a couple of them. His was X-Men
as well.
Yeah. And that is cool. That's something that I do feel like you see with Marvel and with the big two, really. Chris, I do appreciate really just the time and effort that it's taken your story 30 years just to get here. And that's what makes it amazing.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And there were definitely times when I felt like, man, I should just be picking up keys. But I just was like, when I was a little kid, I always thought, wow, imagine if I ever was able to get all these. And so once the train left the station, I was just going to finish it up.
Was there a pun intended there?
Yeah, I think there was.
It kind of just came out.
Yeah. But a couple other comments that I had is, I also think it's really cool that you took your grandfather's collection and then you turned it into a collection. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with doing it for other reasons, but I also think that's kind of cool, and it keeps kind of the essence of his collection because you can see it in your collection and what you did to get to your collection, which I think is pretty awesome, right? Like there's this meme going around of Matt Damon telling his son it's a damn good dream because his son doesn't want to do the same thing he wants to do. Maybe you didn't want to collect railroad stuff, right? But you wanted to collect your stuff, and that's fine. And you were able to do it, and it's still the same essence. And maybe when you give yours to whoever down the line, they don't want to do comic books, but they can sell it and do whatever they want to do with it. And it keeps going down the line, right? The second thing, thinking about this is there's a part of me that wants to do the whole ASM run. There is. And I have a bunch of them, but I sold off a bunch of them too. But it's daunting, right? It's daunting. And I feel the same dauntingness that I felt when I got into collecting much later on than you in life, right? I guess, in my early 20s when I started collecting. The dauntingness that I had because originally the characters that I liked were like Batman and the animated series and stuff like that. But I'm never going to have a Batman 1 or the first appearance of Batman, right? And it was daunting because even at that time they were so expensive. And that's the same feeling I have with collecting the run of ASM. And ASM, I think, is one of the premier runs that people collect. And that's why those ASM books always sell, even the non-keys, even just the fillers. You can sell them for $8 to $10 because people are trying to collect that run, right? But then you look at all the keys in that run. I mean, the first 20 books are probably all keys. Then you have 129, then you have 238, then you have 300. Like, there are just so many keys in that run that it is daunting. So it is something that's difficult to do. And so I congratulate you, for doing it over all these years and continuing to do it and the grind. And just congratulations, man. And that's really cool of you to be able to do that. So thank you for sharing your story here with us and letting us collect this Grail tale.
Appreciate that. And I think I had been looking so forward to that new social media journey I'm starting on that just says collector first, because I was like, it's all about comic book presser. But I was like, that's my story. And it shows people that I'm a collector, not just here to like try and get a quick buck or something. There's a lot of passion behind it. And you'll see there is a lot of like 4.5s, 5.0s, it was just whatever I could get at the time and what the current situation in life was letting me kind of squeak out,
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that about the journey as well. Let's move into our final segment here, because I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of it, but let's do that.
Speculation.
That's right, the speculation segment where we're going to talk about a comic or collectible or something that we feel like maybe you should have your eyes on, maybe you should do a double take, something like that. It might be something you can use to help the hobby pay for itself. Hey, Zeus, I'm going to let you go first.
Man, I'm so excited and so happy that your recent pickup was a trade, because I'm going to talk about trades today. Ooh. Right? And two really interesting trades. One, I didn't know that I had this, but apparently I have some special Infinite Crisis or Crisis on Infinite Earth hardcover that's coveted. It's like rare. It's like $80 or $90 for a trade. And so I was like, okay, so there's some trades out there. And that got me thinking. I mentioned to you, Jake, that this over this holiday week, my kids were off. I wanted to do as much as I could with them, kind of give them somewhat of a reward for the time they put into school already. So I like to take them to movies and they like to go to movies. So I took them to some movies, among other things. So we went to go see, for the younger ones, we went to go see Trolls. Mm-hmm. And then for the older ones, we went to go see The Hunger Games, the prequel. So that got me thinking. And the reason why it got me thinking is Trolls, to me, if you guys have seen Trolls, I don't know if you have kids young enough, or even if you just like Trolls and go see Trolls, they're putting a lot of music to it. Obviously, Justin Timberlake is in it, and Anna Kendrick is in it, who's musically gifted as well. Mm-hmm. But they're mixing and mashing a lot of different genres of music from the 70s and 80s. And it reminded me, growing up, I first learned like jazz through the Jungle Book, through Disney. And I learned a lot about music through Disney because there were a lot of musical sets. I mean, Beauty and the Beast, had, a bunch of songs that were awesome. The Lion King, and you start learning music through that because you like those cartoons. And my kids are now learning music, and they, I played one of the songs, the original songs, to them afterwards, and they really enjoyed the song. So I was like, man, when they grow up, they're gonna want some troll stuff. So there's no Trolls comic books, but what there is there's a troll graphic novel from 2016. That's their first appearance in a graphic novel or comic book, I guess, if you want to call it because like Dark Knight is a graphic novel, right? Like for the most part. And Dark Knight has over 200 pages, whereas this Trolls graphic novel is only 64 pages. It could be literally considered a giant-sized comic book. So Trolls from 2016, the first appearance of these trolls in a comic book format. Get that book because years down the line, it's going to be something that's coveted. And they're cheap right now. They're like $5 for these trades. Second one, there's no Hunger Games. There's a comic book from 2012 that's a autobiography of Suzanne Collins, the writer of Hunger Games, and they mention Hunger Games, and then there's some stuff about Hunger Games, but it's not really Hunger Games. So the other thing that I said, I was like, okay, well, what's like Hunger Games, Maze Runner, and then Twilight. Twilight graphic novel from 2012, 224 pages. That's the first time that Twilight was in a graphic novel or comic book format. And also, I think there's a lot of meat left on the Twilight bone as far as comic book wise. If they don't want to make movies, they're too expensive, they can't get the right actors, whatever. They're vampires. I mean, you can make them in whatever 1600s, 1400s. Go back and see what Edward Cullen did, whoever their names are. There's so much meat left on that bone. But the first time they come out, and that is a graphic novel from 2012. So trades. I got trades for you this week, Jake. Trolls and Twilight trades. Those are my speculation picks for this week.
You got trades. Yeah, totally get it. And no disagreement here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say, cool, good, nice. Moving on. Chris, what do you have this week for our speculation segment?
Cool. I don't have any specific books as much as I was just going to mention a couple titles in general. And really, I should be able to just ramble off a few because sometimes I'll be seeing a lot of one book start to pop up at the press shop, and I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm like, oh, that's what's going on. Like there's rumors of this. But the one I think you could go for right now is that with all the back issues basically price correcting, I feel like it's a safe time to get X-Men books, and that in the future they will have a little bit more room to grow than a lot of other books right now. It's also for some real keys though, it's kind of tricky because people are like, is it going to continue to go down and correct a little bit more? But it seems like a lot of things are starting to kind of level off. So in general, I feel like X-Men books are good ones to get. Anything with the old John Byrne Claremont stuff is freaking awesome. Also, they're killer to read if you want to do that. But I think they're strong spec. I think X-Men 94 is a strong spec right now. I think that book is going to be something that goes up quite a bit. And I also feel like the Jim Lee X-Men, those key issues have a little bit of room because those number ones, I mean, yeah, there was like 1 million or 2 million or 3 million, lots of books. But that's just such a huge, it's the 30-year-old books that people are like turning back to now. So I think the Jim Lee Claremont run is pretty darn cool. I think the number ones on those are pretty neat, the adjoining covers. And I think X-Men in general is my go-to. And then one indie one is Tim Vigil, Faust. Do you guys know who that is?
I don't. No.
Tim Vigil is a badass horror artist.
Okay.
And he came onto my radar with a book called Grips back in the day. And this was a black and white comic, very amazing art and horror, like not horror, sorry, but adult, like cutting people in half with something like a Wolverine claw. And so when I saw that when I was 12, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know this existed.
Nice.
Whoa. That was Grips. But then they made one, him and David Quinn made one called Faust. Faust is a indie book, super gory. It's actually rated X in some ways too. There's some nudity and sex scenes in there too. So beware. Don't even go that way if that stuff scares you. But the art is so amazing. I've always just been like loving Tim Vigil so Sony, after all the boys got so hyped, Sony has optioned Faust for, that's it. Sony has optioned that for an animated series. I think it's going to be 3D animation. So it's going to be super adult, animated series, super gory. So that would be my indie pick. And I already bought all the copies I wanted, so I'm not scared to share
it. Nice. Well done, sir. You know how to play the game. That's great. I now want to get in on Grips and Faust. Both appeal to me. Only when you said that there was nudity and X-rated stuff. That's when I really that's when it
his ears
my
perked up on that one.
Yeah, I have quite a few Tim Vigil original artworks, about 6 of them. Sketches is a better way to put it, but some are a little more advanced. And all of them are just like, the first time I asked him to do Grips, I was like, I meant to ask for something gory, like a severed limb or something. And he was just about finished. So just by the foot, he drew my severed head laying at his feet. And it is so amazing. It's hanging up in my comics book room. I love it.
That's pretty dope. That's awesome. We've been dabbling into the original comic art as well. So this is just, I don't know. It's just serendipitous, I guess, that you're into the original artwork as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to that for sure. Okay, so I think that brings me up for my speculation. And I'm glad that you brought up X-Men, not because I was going to specifically bring up X-Men for my speculation. However, I do think that it plays into the speculation that I am wanting to discuss. And that's so we've talked about the series, the plural. We've talked about the series of the new Transformers and the new G.I. Joe and the universe that's Skybound is creating over there, and things are on the up and up. They're selling a ton of books, right? And I think, I mean, it's pretty easy to say the number ones, right? G.I. Joe number 1, Transformers number 1 from back in the day. Go back. Those are, I think, easy enough. But Jesus, hear me out on this. Do you think that the G.I. Joe and the Transformers universe, as it's continuing to grow now through Skybound, we are getting to a moment where they are expanding into the territory of fandom, and maybe they're already there to a certain extent, but like X-Men, right? You don't just collect number 1, right? Number 1's not just the only most valuable book within the X-Men run, but suddenly, because there's so many characters within the X-Men universe, you collect the first appearances of characters with it. Like, you can go back and like the Dazzler, first appearance of Dazzler is exploding, right? Things like that, because that character gets so popular that she might be performed by Taylor Swift in a movie. That's a fairy tale dream that may come true or something like that. But the thing is our Transformers and G.I. Joes, they have so many unique characters that pop up, and like, I thought it was insane that Skyfire was in the very first issue of Transformers, right? Daniel Warren Johnson brought out, as a kid, the Skyfire episode of the TV show is like burned into the back of my skull, because I remember finding him in the ice and he didn't know who was good and who was evil anymore. And the whole dynamic that played out in that cartoon from my childhood played out in the first issue of Daniel Warren Johnson's book. And I was elated because as a kid, I knew immediately what was going on and who the character was. Now I'm immediately like, I wonder what Skyfire's first appearance was in the original comics. So here's what I'm saying. Transformers, G.I. Joe, this joint universe that Skybound is doing is bringing so much more attention, because Transformers and G.I. Joe already huge, right? I'm not saying that they weren't to begin with, but I do think that what's the loose tides sink all ships, or what's the where all the tide goes up and all the ships get sunk? What I don't know.
Rising tides, Bob's apples.
Bob's apple. That's the one. Anyway, the idea being though, do you think that the Transformers and G.I. Joe universes are so big now that we should stop just looking at the major number one type key, and we should really start looking into first appearance of major characters, because that's the next tier to go to, right? I mean, it's expanding so much.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's so much in that conversation, and I think we're gonna look back at this time with Void Rivals and Transformers and the launching and relaunching of G.I. Joe with Duke and stuff like that, and the big name of Daniel Warren Johnson and his artwork, and also some of the creative choices they made. Like the Void Rivals thing is adding a new wrinkle to it, and I'm really enjoying Void Rivals. I've been reading it. I have issue 6. I was thinking about using that for the recent pickup, but I didn't get a chance to read it. And then also the creative decisions, like I mentioned. I mean, spoiler, that they killed Bumblebee in the first issue, right? And I said spoiler. Oh, okay, yeah. So just
it's already, with all due respect, you can't just say that.
But what I'm saying is, like, who knows what characters are going to rise in Daniel Warren Johnson's, and the reason I say this too is because we know Robert Kirkman. We know he's made multiple. I mean, he's made live action with The Walking Dead. He's made Invincible, which is animation. Where this, and we've seen obviously Transformer mega blockbuster movies that are out there before Kirkman has gotten his hands on it and had Daniel Warren Johnson as a writer and stuff like that. So this is the base. Like, the base is being set and being made. So it is a great time to start looking at some of these characters that Jake is talking about and going back and seeing what's their first appearances. Because like Dinobots is like Transformers number 8, and it was super cheap for a while, even though they made a movie with them. Who's to say they're not going to come out in the near future, right? Who's to say that? At the same time, there's so many other, what's his name? Starscream is the main bad guy now, and they don't say the name of what's
they haven't used Megatron's name yet that I'm aware of, but
they have used it.
Oh, did they? Oh, that's right. The villains did, because they said you don't speak of him.
Yes, exactly.
But the notion though is still that they have not really. Megatron hasn't even entered the room yet. Wait till that guy walks in. I mean, talk about just. Ugh.
Yeah, so that's a great one, man. I think. I've been hearing a lot of things about them selling out, second printing, third printings, and for good reason. So if you guys aren't on it, get on it. As far as reading them right now, Void Rivals, G.I. Joe, the Transformers, and then also starting to look into some of those back issues. And issue number 1, too, I know you mentioned like not just issue 1 but issue 1 of G.I. Joe and issue 1 of Transformers are iconic issues. They're both red backgrounds, both look really cool. Get those too if you can find a good deal on them. But yeah, also start looking into some of those first appearances in those runs, because I think they are going to pop off here pretty soon once something gets announced.
Yeah, and I do think that something will get announced, or at the very least, the popularity of this current series, or the universe that they're really launching, I do think is going to bring more attention to certain characters, and it's going to pop off their original appearances.
And if I can riff off that for 1 second too, Skybound typically, and Kirkman typically has like mystery boxes and stuff every year. At least they did a few years ago. I don't follow that and do it every year, but it happens right around now. I think just before the holidays. Hopefully, I'm not saying this and it just happened last week, but I got one of those Negan red foil covers from one a couple years ago.
Nice.
I was so excited. Nice. I mean, sure, I kept it because I'm a big Walking Dead fan, and I didn't sell it when it was like $1,000, but it's a 9.8 now, CGC. Oh. And so it could be interesting. They're probably going to have some, based on what I've seen in the past, they might have some amazing exclusive covers in those mystery boxes coming out anytime. Really.
Yep, that would make a lot of sense. That's why you're on here. That's why you're on here, Chris, because you know that stuff, man. And now
Revealing information. I immediately Googled it, and so they do have Comics Vault Live CGC Mystery Box. I mean, I Googled it, so I don't know if this is. It says you can add it to your cart. They might be available right now. And
this was through Skybound, and it had all kinds of toys and stuff in it too. It was actually really fun because there was so much stuff in it. Just all their back stuff, I guess, at the end of the year. But it had like one CGC comic in each one, and a couple Raws, and a bunch of toys and pins and everything.
Well, the one that I'm seeing here, it says, so backed by popular demand, all different Comics Vault Live CGC Mystery Bundle. Each bundle contains 4 CGC graded 9.8 comics, 1 guaranteed 9.8 Walking Dead or Walking Dead Deluxe, 1 guaranteed Invincible 9.8, 2 additional 9.8s from the CVL Vault.
Yep, that sounds about similar. Yeah.
It's an interesting idea. I didn't know they existed.
That's pretty cool.
Jesus is like, all right, I'm going to get one.
Yeah, I'm going to get one. Dang it.
When I was on the store to get that, actually, I bought a Walking Dead skateboard, like a real skateboard, for $6. They must have just had like an extra 10,000 of them or something.
Wow.
It was awesome. I bought one for me and one for my son.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well,
That
see,
is pretty cool.
You know what? It goes to show you, if you listen to Spec Tales, you will learn whatever our guest knows, because that's who usually dispenses all the knowledge on this show. So, Chris, thank you so much for dispensing that knowledge and for joining us, because we've made it to the end.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Very much so. And I will say, I think we would love to maybe dive deeper into comic book pressing or things like that. And that may be something that, Chris, we kind of have a spin-off show that we called Floppies that we do specifically for our patrons, people who subscribe to our show. And I think this is a worthwhile conversation to really dive a little bit deeper into the work that you're doing. So we may want to talk a little bit more. Hey, Zeus, I don't want to speak out of school, but that's kind of what I was thinking.
No, dude, there's so many conversations that Jake and I have had, and we'll relate some to Ryan too, because, Ryan to us is, he's a good friend of ours, and he has, a lot of knowledge, of CGC and what they count out for, and what's the highest grade you can get with a detached cover or with the rusty staple, just stuff like that, right? Like, and so Jake and I have conversations because we are speculators in some ways to an extent, because we're trying to buy low to sell at a higher so we can get the stuff that we want to get. And we're always trying to figure out, like, well, what would this grade for? Well, if we bought this and it has this, but we get this fixed, and it's just us. We're not pressers. We don't know what can and can't be done. So I think that's a worthwhile conversation to kind of get some of those maybe answers that Jake and I, or answers to the questions that Jake and I have had in the past during our conversation. I think we had one about Hulk 181 with the Marvel value stamp and buying those green labels, pressing them, cleaning them, and then sending them and asking them to do a blue label instead, right? Because they can still do a blue label, but they'll just knock the grade down tremendously, right? Like, so those are some questions that we had, and I think Jake is right. I think it'd be really cool if we could do a floppies to get.
Yeah, I think we need to do a deeper dive, so we have more time with you. So if you don't mind, Chris, we may bend your ear more if you're interested.
Yeah, we should do it. And I have a Hulk blue label with the coupon cutout 2.5, so I guarantee they can hit that at least at one time. They did.
Nice.
No,
See?
at least a 2.5. See?
So
yeah, no, I'm serious. We were saying like 1.8, 2.0 was max that we could probably get. So now we know at the very least, seriously, now we know at least we've seen a 2.5 without the coupon.
Into that. It does kind of have to go with that might have been what they gave it 10 years ago, and now you can do it 25 times, and it might always be a 1.8 because it is kind of like the wave,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely have one.
Nice.
Awesome.
Well,
yep. Well, get a hold of me for that, fellas.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Chris. And thanks to everybody for listening in. We appreciate it. You can join us again next week when we will be talking to the one true Nerd King. If you don't know who that is, feel free to Google. And if you know who that is, you'll be back. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.